All right, guys, what it do? Today is the day. We're building the War Pig. Little bittersweet. I mean, obviously I'm stoked to build the War Pig, but just having this thing laying around like the frame, just being able to like pick it up, look at all the welds and everything like that. I mean, this is the kind of art I appreciate, and just to have this frame like hanging on the wall, I'd have been totally stoked and happy with that. So I'm going to build it, and then hopefully we get some good sessions in, and I can get some videos put up of actually riding it. So let's get into it. Kind of a long video because I'm not going to take the time to kind of like edit through everything. So if you're bored and you got some time to kill and you want to watch somebody build a bike, here it is. All right, so first things first, and I'll kind of go over some of the tricks and tips that I use to build these bikes, some things I've learned along the way. So I already got the seat post clamp on it. This is just a like an Originate or a Black Ops double seat post clamp. It's actually perfect for this frame. I'll show you why. Let me find my Allen wrench here. So this clamp is cool because it's double stack, but unlike those old Primo Viking clamps, the edge is all the way at the top. So on these War Pig frames, they have a really tall section of seat post. So this thing actually drops on all the way down. Pretty cool clamp, I think. Now, sure, I can clamp it on the seat tube. I'm not a big fan of clamping the frame of the bike. I cringe every time I see someone clamp a bike frame directly into the bike stand. I get it. It's probably okay to clamp the seat post, but you do run the risk of damaging paint or decal, especially if the bike starts twisting, even if you have a rag in the clamp. But the worst, the don't ever do in my book is when people clamp the actual top tube or down tube of a frame. Some of those frames were really thin back in the day, and you could actually crush the tubing. I've seen it happen. So what I like to do is take a seat post, generally kind of an old beater post. Here I got this is a post from a old Haro that I had, and I'm going to use that to clamp the frame. So, move some stuff out of the way. I did my best to kind of pre-game this whole thing so that the build goes smooth. I didn't want you guys to have to sit there and watch me fumble around and mess things up. Although I'm already fumbling around with this tri-tool, just trying to figure out the right size here of the clamp bolts. All right, so here we go. Just gonna snug that up. And when I say pre-game, I mean I've kind of gone through already and tightened up, kind of measured everything out, especially like the bottom bracket here. I already got the spacer measured out that sits in between the cups. I was going to do kind of like a how-to tutorial on installing a mid-size bottom bracket, but I'm sure it exists on the web already, so no big deal. But that's the first thing we'll install. So one thing I like to do with these cups, this is a brand new bottom bracket. It's a Black Ops American bottom bracket. But what I do is I'll take a Dremel and I'll take off the anodizing on the inside and on the outside edge of the cup. So reason I do that is these old mid-school frames, the tolerances just weren't very consistent frame to frame. Anybody that had an old S&M or a standard knows the battles we went through to install bearings in the bottom bracket. And 9 times out of 10, by the time those cups were pushed in, there was so much pressure on them, they'd be crushing, they'd be squeezing that bearing. The bearing wouldn't even spin. You'd destroy the bearing. So, because, you live and you learn a little bit of finesse. So I take off a little bit of the aluminum on the outside and inside of the cup, usually clean up the inside of the frame a little bit, and it really helps make sure that these go in. My goal ultimately is to have the bearings kind of be able to like tap them in the same way you would on a modern frame, like on a modern mid bottom bracket. So one thing also that I do that I know a lot of people don't do is I put grease on everything. Anywhere there's metal on metal contact, I got grease. 2 reasons, right? One, well, you want to be able to get these out if you need to in the future. You don't want any kind of like oxidation or rusting or corrosion to bond the 2 materials together, especially when you got aluminum on steel. So apply a thin layer of grease, and that just ensures the cups come out. But more importantly than that, I'm going to keep dropping things, I'm sure, because I'm filming. That's inevitable. Whatever I can do to just look stupid well on camera is what's going to go down. And I've come to peace with that. So, the other big reason you put grease between any 2 surfaces is to prevent noise, creaking, crackling, all that type of stuff. All right, I can see already I don't have a rag. All that prep work and I didn't grab a rag. Let me do that. All right, even better than a rag, right? Paper towels, little Windex. You can see here on the TV back here I have the 50 years of Troy McMurray video playing that was posted on the S&M channel. Just thought it would be fitting while I build the War Pig. You can watch some clips of Troy shredding. So the way I like to do the bottom bracket is I actually like to take the bearings out of the cups. Like I said, I sand the outside of the cups, the inside edge of the cups, take a little bit of surface off of them. And then I'll install the outer cups, these outer aluminum cups first, using a headset press. Why? Well, so I can kind of keep track. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. I was going to do it on that side so you guys could see me spin the... Oh, my Lord. You see? You see, your boy's already looking stupid. All right, there we go. There's that other bearing cup. All right, let's see. Let's get this in straight this time. The other cool thing too is once you put these outer cups in, then you're free to kind of, it makes it easier to put the little sleeve that sits in between the bearings in. So there we go, going in pretty smooth. Not the smoothest install I've ever seen on one of these though, but not too bad. And I'll be honest, man, if those bearings don't like tap right in, I may take out more material. Oh, did I just put a nick or a ding in the clear coat? Probably. You know, I always think like I'm super experienced and such a great mechanic. I mean, I have worked as a bike mechanic for many, many, many years. But there's times like this I realize, man, I'm just average at best. I know what I'm doing, but those little mistakes, like when you hit the frame, dude, imagine if I was building some guy's like freshly powder coated 1985, GT Performer or something like that, and I went and nicked the brand new paint. Dude, I mean, yes, that shit happens, but a more experienced mechanic wouldn't allow it to. Okay, outer cups in. Now, like I was saying, I kind of pre-gamed this thing a little bit. Let's see if I can flip this up, let you guys see what I'm talking about. Now, the idea with these sleeves is they sit directly between the bearings, and when you crank down your crank arms, since it's putting force on the outside of the bearing, this is going to prevent those bearings from being ruined, right? Because if there was nothing in between these bearings and you tighten that crank arm down, it's going to push that inner piece of the bearing and want to push it through, right? And it's going to put a bunch of force on the bearings and you'll ruin it. So these little sleeves sit in between the bearings so that when you tighten down your cranks, you don't destroy your bearings. Now, once again, going back to the tolerances of these mid-school frames, these shell widths, They were always kind of close, but they would vary in width. And for that reason, when you ordered a set of cranks, like profiles, you see here, you would get multiple sizes of these sleeves. So you can see one's longer than the other. All right, so this is where I find out if I took enough material off the cup. All right, let's see here. So once again, we'll get some grease. I'll start with this outside one since it's the harder one for me to reach. Let's get a little grease. On the inside of the cup there. Help the bearing slide in, help keep the creaking to a minimum. All right. Where are the bearings? All right, here are the bearings. The other thing too you'll notice between good bearings and cheap bearings, like if you take those old Primo bearings or Primo profile bearings, they can take a lot more pressure before they start binding. You know, this is a Black Ops bottom bracket. I don't think these are very high-end bearings, and because of that, it doesn't take much pressure for them to start binding the bearing. But I can kind of see right now that it looks like they are going to go in okay. This is a little rubber mallet, just hitting the outside edge of the bearing. And you can see that bearing's going right in. Ha-ha! It's in there and the bearing's rolling smooth. Beautiful. Beautiful! All right, what I'm gonna do too is I'm gonna get a spindle. So the cranks I'm putting in this bike are Rant Bangor 48 cranks. These are a cheap crank, right? But they're heat treated 4130. The spindle's heat treated 4140. And then I actually got the first gen version of these cranks where the chrome is actually really good. The chrome is sharp all the way throughout. I just picked up a new set of these. The chrome's not as nice. But for the amount of riding this bike is going to see, I can tell you these cranks are going to be plenty strong. Now, what did I do with that spacer? Oh my gosh. All that talk about the spacers, and I don't even know where I put it. Here's a secret. 90% of working in a shop is looking for shit. Seriously. I can't imagine how much could actually get done if you knew where everything was in a shop. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm putting this spacer in just to hold, I'm putting the spindle through that bearing so that I can use it to hold the spacers on. And of course, I'm going to get some grease. Grease up that inside of that cup so that bearing goes in nice and smooth. I'm super stoked that this is where I can tell I do have enough experience or that I do have years of experience. I knew exactly how much aluminum to take off. Basically, I just use a Dremel with a little sanding wheel just to basically remove the black on the anodizing. But I have had some frames, specifically a standard STA 500, where I had to basically machine out a layer of aluminum to get it to go in smooth. I'll tell you one thing, man. This is the first bike I've built in this little office space. This is obviously not what this space was designed for. So having to grind things, I have to like run outside and do it kind of like on the stoop outside the little office here. And damn, it sure makes a difference building a bike in a shop versus just kind of patchworking it together inside of an office like this. But hell, we will get it done. So this is actually the set of cranks I'm putting on there. I went ahead and stuck the spindle onto the left side arm because I'm going to basically install this side first, because once it's in, it's in. All right, where is the bearing? There is the bearing. Grease. Let's grease. It's all right. I can see now that I did. Look at this. I can almost pop that bearing in just with my finger, so I got it really well sanded out now. There we go. I push that through. All right, so there's half the cranks. Let's do the drive side. So the sprocket I am running, I have had this sprocket since it came out. This is the Medusa from Eastern Bikes. This is the first generation of it. That was actually CNC'd out of 7000 series aluminum. And I can see why not too many manufacturers use 7000 aluminum. It just doesn't wear out. It doesn't bend. It doesn't break. These damn sprockets seem to last forever. So, yeah, I've had the sprocket for ages, and it's still in really good shape. So one of the cool things about these old frames is they built these frames with enough clearance to run a 44 tooth sprocket. So when running a smaller sprocket like this 36 tooth sprocket, you actually don't have to put very many spacers between the chain ring and the bottom bracket, and it allows you to run that sprocket like really close to the frame, which gives you really good chain alignment. See which hole I want to go through here. That's the crazy thing with the Medusa. Check it out. Yeah, 2, 4, 6, 8 different crank arm positions that you could run. So you could continually rotate this sprocket. And that's about it. So I'm just kind of going to not going to put it super tight yet because I want to be able to line everything up. This is the fun one, right? Lining up the crank to make sure they're parallel with each other. I can see here that I'm off a tooth, so I'm going to pull this back out. Try it again. Is that it? Boom, there it is. Got them lined up. Now the moment of truth is we're going to put the crank arm bolts on. Once again, a little bit of grease. That's the other thing too. Don't be afraid to throw a little grease on the bolts, on the head of the bolts, wherever it's metal to metal, because it's actually going to allow them to spin when you tighten things down. I also do put grease on the spindle splines. Also prevents things from creaking. So if I did this correctly, if I measured out that inner spacer correctly, I should be able to crank these bolts down tight without binding the bearings, without the crank slowing down. They should spin smooth and free with these bolts cranked down. There it is. Nice and tight, buttery smooth. Now at this point, I know the sprocket's on and lined up, so I can go ahead and tighten up the bolt that holds the sprocket on. Dang, the sprocket still spins straight too. And I've done my share of disasters on this thing. One last check to make sure the Alignment is true. Right on the money, even on both sides. And there it is. The hardest part is done. Everything from this point forward should be a cakewalk. All right. Let's get the headset in. Now, here's what's pretty cool. Another little, let me give you another little tip. So, I have always liked the Diacomp tank headsets. That is this bad boy right here. And these, I used to just have, I don't know, half a dozen of them. And I'd build a bike and I'd sell a bike, or I'd give one to a friend or whatever to get thrown out because one was all scuffed up. Flash forward, these things are super hard to find now. So, the last freaking headset that I have, my last tank headset, it was all pitted and rusted and I cleaned it up. But I saved 2 lower cups. And this was kind of my signature setup back in the day. I would run 2 lower cups, both upper and lower on the frame. Now the thing is, if you come across these old Diacomp tank headsets, you might find the cup, but it's getting the guts, the bearings, the seals, the races that are kind of hard to come by. Some people, well, obviously the bearings got destroyed, but a lot of people ended up cracking the lower races because they'd smash them onto forks with, a piece of pipe, and the fork tolerances weren't very good like the rest of these old mid-school frames, and they'd end up cracking. So here's a cool little trick. Here's a cool little piece of information. Rant, once again, makes an 1.1/8" headset called Bang Your Headset. The guts of these headsets are the exact same as the original Diacomp, whatever you want to call it, guts. The bearings, you can see the seal sitting on there. In fact, I'm going to go as far to say is these Rant guts fit these better than the original Diacomp. Because the original Diacomp ones, the seal would kind of drag on the race and slow it down a little bit. These ones don't. They don't get in the way. So, I'm going to go ahead and install this headset here. And we'll keep the party moving. What should I do? The shinier one on the top or the shinier one on the bottom? One is a little shinier than the other. Let's see here. What's going to look better? I'm going to do the shinier one on the bottom. Yeah. Shinier one on the bottom. Clean this up just a little bit. Guess what I'm doing next? Ho, 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 ho. Put a little grease on it. There are so many ways to use that headset press. For so many years, I would use that headset press without any of the little collars that go on it. Just basically run the 2 big flat surfaces. I'd push in both headset cups at the same time. But for the sake of doing things to the utmost today, I'm going to do it right. So, if you really want your headsets to go in smooth, I recommend installing them one at a time. And what you can do is use one of these to center in the frame. Drop the other one onto the press. Drop your cup. Make sure that's the right cup. Onto this, which will center it. And then run it in. The cool thing with this is that cup is going to be completely flat and straight. Hopefully you can see this. Let me spin this up just a little bit. Hopefully that'll get you. There it is. One down, one to go. Yes, you can put them in at the same time. You could just stack one cup on top, one on the bottom, and let it rip. Or you can do it this way. Now, generally, I would just run these cups like right to here. Boom, right? No little collar in there. Because I didn't want that collar like scuffing up the bearing surface. And these cups are so thick, you're not going to really have to worry about damaging them. But I looked, and these actually sit very well into the cup. No issues. So that's what we're going to do. Bam, there we go. That is the headset. I'm just going to check the surface of these cups because I am paranoid that nope, nothing. Super smooth. Got the right cup in the right place. Bam. Looking good, looking good. What's funny is I actually had some grease in here already, but you know, I've been grinding aluminum and stuff, so I'm going to give them one little wipe down. I'll put some fresh grease in there. Here's the next thing. I'm going to show you what fork and stem I'm going to use. I have a fork that, to be honest, would be the absolute best fork for this bike. Get a load of this guy. That is an S&M ditch fork. In really good shape. As you can see, there's no grind rash on the bottom of this or anything. The problem is, I just don't think the chrome goes with the raw all that great. Plus, like I said, I am planning on riding this bike. So, the fork we are using is this guy. This is the first gen We the People Excalibur fork, fully heat treated. This thing is in super good shape. Almost no use at all. I already put the race on. Made a ghetto homemade race setter. Basically used a bearing cup, the rant cup, stacked a bunch of other junk on it, put a peg over the top, whacked that thing on, went on smooth, no big deal. So this is the fork that we're using. But here's the conundrum. The stem that I'm using. Look at this, guys. This is an Eastern JFK. This is one of the early lightweight hollowed out stems from back in the day. It's fully hollowed out. But why did they call it the JFK? The bolt heads have holes in them. That's right. Who else has a hole in their head? Cool thing with these old mid-school stems is they'd usually print the logo, company name on the underside because a lot of people would run these upside down. I'm not going to do that. But as you can see, this stem has been through some shit, man. It has been clamped and reclamped so many times that the aluminum is kind of closing in on itself. This stem will not slide onto a steer tube. Now there's two ways to open up one of these stems to get it on the steer tube of a fork. In this stem, unfortunately, the threads are kind of jacked on the backside here. But one of the cool tricks would be is you run a bolt through the opposite side. You put like a washer or a coin or something in there, and then you tighten that bolt into that coin, and it'll spread that stem open. The stem will slide right on. Unfortunately, I can't do that with this stem. So we're going to have to go with the old school tactic. As you can see, I've done the old school tactic several times on this bad boy. And that is take a screwdriver, stab it in there, and hammer it in, and wedge it open. So I'm going to take the bolts out. But I do want to have this stem kind of like ready to go. So once I get the headset together, I can drop the stem on. Cool, let's get to it. Time for some grease. Starting to realize like 90% of a bike build is just putting grease on. Take that bearing now, squish that up in there. Where is my fork? So before I put the fork in, I'm going to go ahead and get some grease up on the top bearing. Just relying on the grease to hold that bottom bearing in at this point, which it usually does, no problem. See, this is the art of building a mid-school bike right here. Everything nowadays has all these sealed bearings on it. You don't get time to really bond with your bike. Drop that bearing in there. Take that excess grease. Push it in between the little balls there. Yeah, I know what I said. Don't worry, this channel's not monetized anyways. If you're watching, I feel sorry for you. No, I'm joking. Thank you. If you're watching, thank you. I know this could probably have been executed a lot smoother on my behalf. To be honest, I thought I could knock this out like in 16, 20 minutes. But it's all the little unforeseen circumstances that make this fun, I guess. Where's the fork? There's a fork. Where are my zip ties? Put the little dust seal on this guy. This is the game of operation right here. The game I play is to try and put the steer tube through without touching any of the grease off the bearings. Did I do it? I think I did it. Then I'll take the zip tie, if I can do it with one-handed. There we go. I'm going to zip tie the fork on. So now we can work without having to worry about the fork slide now. Put the upper race in there. I put the zip tie too tight. I'm pulling the race out of place. Plus I didn't put the seal on anyways. There we go. Put the seal on. Drop the race on. Drop the little centering piece. Make sure that's centered to the fork. And there we go. Now this is where I'll take a little Windex and just clean up the steer tube. In my mind, even a little bit of grease on the steer tube will make my stem slip. It's not true, but that's how I think. Now, we can kind of see how much spacer stack we need here. So we're going to need one good spacer. I guess I could run the Rant top cap, but to be honest with you, as much as I like Rant stuff, it's not necessarily cool to be like rocking Rant branding on the bike, right? That should work. Remember what I said I'm doing with this thing? I take a screwdriver and I'm going to hammer that screwdriver down inside of this stem. Hopefully there it is. Got our compression cap for our stem. As you can figure out by now, no matter how much preparing I did, wasn't enough. It's a lesson to learn, right? You can prepare all you want. I might have to loosen it up a little bit, to be honest. It's crazy. Like, by mid-school standards, this is a smooth headset. By modern standards, this sucks. This is what it is, man. Crazy. Let's see here. The bolts. Gotta put these bolts back in. I used to work in a shop, and every time someone dropped a tool, we'd be like, all right, you got to put $1 into the jar. I'll tell you another thing I'm discovering. It's hard to make small talk with nobody. It's hard to just talk to the camera while you're building a bike for this long. Typically, I'd be sitting here with some music playing. There it is. We got a stem. We got the cranks. We got the headset. It's coming together, guys. It's coming together. Okay, guys. The next piece of the puzzle, this is the handlebars. Bam! The Bone Death Dead Man in a 9-inch rise. These are the V2 version of these bars. I do not know why they stopped making these. They still make the Dead Man, but it's like wider down here. They're just a bigger bar. They go to like a 9.5 now. This was the, I don't know. I'm so glad I saved this set of bars, and this is the same set of bars I run on my daily, right? My favorite handlebar. Bone Death, bring them back. Let's see, where is the Allen wrench? Let's take these bolts with holes in them out. Get some bars on this bad boy. What's going on back here? Looks like Clint Reynolds shredding. Boy, back in my day, I used to do all those crazy tricks. No. I thought I could build this bike in the time it took that first video I had on to finish. Here I am on a second video. Okay. Go ahead and hang these like that. Still going smooth, man. This old mid-school stuff, some of it, there was this era like in the early 2000s when they were figuring out like good materials, right? They were coming off the 90s where everything was like super overbuilt and beefy, but they started figuring out heat treating and the type of aluminum to use for machining and all that type of stuff. And it was this like cool sweet spot with like overbuilt but great materials, and you ended up with like a handful of stuff that just won't die. You know, like that sprocket, like this stem. So boom. Now I'm just gonna take a little guess on this guy, of course. Make sure the gaps are good. It's a little bit tight in the front. Hold on here. Man, it's becoming a bike. I'm starting to feel that like excitement. Now, they're not very centered, but to be honest, it's not until I get this whole bike off the stand that I'm actually going to put a lot of time into getting these things dialed in. Let's see. I'm just going to move them over just a little bit. Ooh, there it is. There's my steering. All right. Let's get into the rest of it. Let's pop the chain on. Shadow half link. Yeah, it ain't never correct, but either is a lot of this stuff. Like I said, I'm gonna ride this thing. When I build bikes to be ridden, I'm building bikes that I'm not really too invested in emotionally with the parts, you know? Other than this frame, everything else I could just like really beat up and not feel too bad about it. Here's the Shadow half-link specific chain tool. You're not supposed to like reuse these pins, you know? You're not supposed to push a pin out and then use that same pin and push it back through. I've done that several times on these chains without issue. Knock on wood. I'm not even superstitious, but I figure some of you are that are watching, so I don't need the bad juju. I don't need the judgment. It was like sunny out when I started this project. It's like the sun's already going down. It's not good. I'm not very impressed with myself. All right, let's move on to the fun stuff, guys. The fun stuff. What wheels am I running? I built these guys right here. Once again, talking about mid-school era, early 2000 stuff that just won't die. These are Odyssey. This is the first generation of Odyssey Hazard cassette with a 13-tooth driver on it. How buttery smooth that is. I put fresh bearings in it. God, smoothest hub I have, hands down. And I have profile hubs on my other bike. And this is way smoother. And this has been through hell and back. This hub has been laced to probably 3 different rims at this point. So, freaking props to Odyssey. Now, one thing that I got on here that's really cool is these guys. These are called the Circle Jerks, and they're made by Alienation. Freaking awesome, cool idea. So what you do is when your wheel's on, basically you pull your chain tight, you measure the distance between your axle and your frame, and they make these in like 5 or 6 different sizes, and each side is different by 0.5 millimeter. And you find the one that basically sits right in the dropout and takes up the space between the axle and the dropout, and it acts like a chain tensioner. That way your wheel can't shift forward. Like I said in that previous video, I actually machined these down a little bit. That way I can run this rear end at 13 3/4, and I measured it so that those little Circle Jerk chain tensioners fit perfectly in there, keep my wheel dead straight, keep my chain perfectly tensioned. That's how I roll, buddy. Let's get some tires on here. So, because I'm running this rear end slammed, it actually gives me a little bit of issues with tire clearance. So I'm having to run this guy right here. And thank you, Maxxis Tires, for still making this thing. This tire has been a lifesaver, man. This is a Maxxis Grifter, but in a 1.85. Like a 1.75 is just too skinny, right? 1.95 would be ideal, but it barely rubs. This 1.85, like fully aired up, is kind of like just shy of a 1.95. And beyond that, man, it's a great tire. Like, I used to not be a huge fan of the look of these tires, but once I ran them, I was a convert, man. I was like, this is the tire I want on all my bikes. There's just something about, like, yeah, they grip, of course, but a couple things. One, they are lightweight, right? They are very lightweight. Let me see. I'm the type of dude that's got to line the valve stem up with the with the logo. That's just how I do it. Okay. Bam. But there's something about the pliability, I guess you could call it. In the gravel bike world, they call it suppleness, or the supple factor. But as I've discovered, the ride quality of your tire, whether it's your vehicle or your bicycle, has more to do with the way the tire is built, the type of rubber used. All those factors matter more to how smooth that ride is than how much pressure you're running. I was running some Animal GLH tires, ran them for years, And I'd run those things down as low as like 40 PSI, and it still just felt super harsh when I landed. These, I could run around 60, and they are way smoother than those GLHs were even at 40 pounds. And it's just because of how the tire's built. So there you go. Animal GLH. So we're going to pop this chain on. Look at this. Look at the smoothness. I'm going to take my little chain tensioner buddies here. Now the tough thing is because these things are in variation from one side to the other by 0.5 millimeter, sometimes it's kind of hard figuring out which side is the thicker side, which side's the narrower side. It is marked by a little indentation, like a little hole. And I'm sure it's in the instruction manual or something as to where. I think that little hole, let's see if you can see it, that little tiny hole, I think that indicates that that's the wider side of the two. It looks to be that way anyways. So I need to run the narrower side. All right, first we'll get this side on. Bam. And then we'll get this side on. There we go. So you can see there's a big variation. I don't know if you can see this. But as I spin this, the chain goes between like no slack and a lot of slack. And so what that means is that my sprocket is oscillating on the spindle, or on the spindle of the cranks here. So I'll show you a little trick to centering that up. So what I'm going to do to get the chain tension evened out is I'm going to loosen the sprocket. Now generally I would have to do this with the axle bolts on, this thing tightened down, but with these little chain tensioners, that's really not an issue right now. So I'm going to loosen the sprocket bolt, and I'm going to find the tight spot of the chain. I'm going to squeeze it. And what that's going to do, it's going to line up my sprocket a little bit better. See that? That's an old trick from back in the day when people ran the 5-bolt spiders. Sometimes that sprocket wouldn't sit completely centered. So what you do is you snug down those bolts. You don't, not like, just kind of finger tight them. You roll that crank back until you see where the chain gets tight. Squeeze that chain just a little bit. Not a lot, otherwise it's going to shift the whole sprocket into a loose position. Squeeze it just a little bit, roll it, and you just finesse it until you get that sprocket nice and centered. Then you can tighten those bolts down. And that's kind of what we're doing right here. And that's kind of one of the drawbacks to these old crank setups. You know, these modern cranks, and I say old crank setups because even though this is a modern crank, it's still designed like the old profiles, where I'm having to use like one of those top hat crank spacers or sprocket shims. Let me see if that worked. Everything's really tight now. So it's a little bit tight, but we'll finesse it a little bit more once the bike's all put together. If necessary, I can always flip these to the looser position. All right, so where are we at now? I'm gonna bolt down this rear wheel. I'll put some air in it, make sure I got enough clearance for the tire once it's inflated. In fact, let's just do that now. And then I can find out if I need to loosen up those chain tensioners or not. Don't lower this whole stand here because my air pump doesn't reach. So I think I'm going to take this to like 60 probably. Being that it's a narrower tire, you'd want to run more pressure because there's less sidewall to absorb impacts. So to actually go out and session this bike, I'd probably run this tire around 70 PSI. Okay, so I got this thing at 80. I went ahead and like overfilled it just so I could see how much room I had and if I had enough room to move the chain tensioner, because I can see it's pretty tight over here. It is nice and centered up top, pretty well centered at the bottom. I think I might be able to run and flip these tensioners. Can't believe how slack that is though. Just 0.5 millimeter, man. Makes a world of difference. But there it is. I mean, how smooth is that, you know? All right, let's throw some pegs on it and tighten that up. All right, so pegs. Pretty much everything going on this bike is in new condition or in like next to new condition. Except these pegs. These pegs are beat up. But I'm not buying a new set of pegs just to go thrash them, right? The whole point is you grind the shit out of your pegs. But these pegs right here are the OG lightweight peg. These are the McNeil pegs. These pegs, if I'm not mistaken, were the first to ever use like internally machined weight reduction. So both of them are pretty well worn. So I'm going to go ahead and put the one that's a little less worn on my dominant grind side. Put the other one on this side. I'll bolt those down. It just wouldn't be a bike build without losing everything, right? Unfortunately, I forgot I had taken my 17 and my ratchet with me on my last ride. And so there I was looking around for it. Look, I don't even have a bolt in there. I'm trying to tighten this thing up. Where are the bolts? Okay, here's one of them. 7000 series aluminum Eastern axle nuts. Once again, another product that was just built right. I've purchased modern aluminum axle nuts and they're nowhere near as durable as these. I don't know why. So the materials matter, man. Now for ages I'd see people wrestling to like tighten one side and pull the wheel and tighten the other. If you're doing that, something's wrong. And generally what's wrong is the spacing. Like that usually means you've had to spread the chainstay to put the wheel in, or your hub isn't spaced wide enough for the distance between the two dropouts. Because if you do it properly, you can just tighten it and you're not going to get any shifting of the wheel. Of course, I got these cool little chain tensioners in there, but so there it is. The back of the bike is assembled. Time to move on to the front wheel. Front wheel, no surprise, Odyssey Vandero hub, first gen, 7000 series aluminum, the good stuff, laced to a Sun big baller rim. So is the back. We got a stainless steel DT Swiss spokes, fresh bearings in there. Dude, just good old American horsepower, I guess. Make sure my wheels, I do build them myself. They are directional. I build them so that the labels are readable from the drivetrain side. Looking through the valve hole, you can see the label on the hub. And there we go. What's fascinating to me, like that rear tire, it just slipped right on. Yeah, this one went on pretty smooth too. I thought it was actually fighting me a little bit. I mean, look at these Maxxis grifters, dude. Like, no tools necessary. That tube does want to kind of come out. There it is. Front, probably run about 60 pounds. Maybe 50. Maybe 40. So like I said, I'm running a 1.85 in the back, but the front, I'm running a big fat 2.3. I'm not gonna put the front tire on yet because I like to do that with the bike upside down. At this point, I realize pretty much done, right? I'm gonna tighten down these stem bolts here on the bars. I'll put the seat and seat post on, which I'll show you now. That's the Bone Death, the OG leather Spider fat seat, pivotal. Another piece of coolness here that I've saved over the years. Well, there she is, guys. Thanks for watching. Sorry if you got bored to death. I thought this would go a lot smoother than it did. But let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any suggestions for future videos. If there's anything you want me to discuss, that's what we'll do. Of course, I'm gonna say it for the first time ever. Apparently, if you like the videos, it helps the visibility of them. So please like the video. If you like the video, if you don't like the video, then don't like it. Subscribe if you want. If you think you want to watch future videos, and throw me a comment, share some ideas with me, man. Take it easy. Till next time.